Football fans, we need to talk about one of the most gut-wrenching pieces of injury news to hit the Washington Commanders in recent memory. Because just when this fan base thought the good vibes of training camp could not possibly get any better, the football gods delivered a brutal reality check. The team's star left tackle, a player they just handed a massive, market-resetting contract to for the third time in his career, went down during a routine one-on-one practice rep with a torn tricep, and the ripple effects of this single injury are about to reshape the entire offensive line for the rest of this season. So take a deep breath, because we are diving into everything you need to know about this devastating development and exactly how this team might respond. Let's start with exactly how this all unfolded, because there was nothing dramatic or controversial about the play itself. This was simply a standard, fully padded one-on-one pass rush drill during a Saturday practice session. Roughly a week before the team's preseason opener, the veteran left tackle was squared up against one of the team's prized new edge rushing additions, engaging in exactly the kind of physical, competitive rep that happens dozens of times every single day at NFL training camps across the league. There was no cheap shot, no extracurricular activity, nothing resembling foul play whatsoever. Two elite competitors were simply doing their jobs, going full speed at each other in a legitimate football collision, and during that collision, the veteran tackle's tricep gave out. Witnesses on the practice field described him immediately dropping to his knees, grabbing his arm in obvious pain, a visceral, unmistakable reaction from a player widely regarded as one of the toughest, most physically imposing competitors on this entire roster. According to reporting from national NFL insiders, sources close to the situation confirmed that this star left tackle suffered a torn tricep during those one-on-one drills, and the expectation is that he will likely require surgery, putting a significant portion of his season, if not the entire year, in genuine jeopardy. This is not a minor tweak or a stinger that will resolve itself within a few days of rest. Tricep injuries requiring surgical repair typically carry recovery timelines ranging anywhere from roughly 6 to 9 months for a complete rupture, a timeline that realistically points toward this veteran missing the vast majority, if not the entirety, of the coming regular season. To fully appreciate why this particular injury hits so hard for this organization, you have to understand exactly what this player means to this football team beyond just his individual talent. This is a 5-time Pro Bowl caliber left tackle, a player this front office valued highly enough to negotiate a third separate contract extension for during his career, effectively making him one of the highest paid players at his position anywhere in the league. And most critically, his primary job on every single offensive snap is protecting the blind side of this franchise's most important asset, the starting quarterback. When your blindside protector for a rising young quarterback suddenly goes down for an extended stretch, that is not simply losing a good player. That is losing arguably the single most important non-quarterback piece on your entire roster, the player directly responsible for keeping opposing pass rushers away from your franchise quarterback's back on every single dropback. This news arrived at a particularly cruel moment for this fan base as well, landing just days after the excitement and celebration surrounding the arrival of a major veteran receiver addition to this roster. Fans had barely finished processing that exciting news before this devastating injury report completely shifted the entire mood surrounding training camp. It is exactly the kind of gut punch that longtime supporters of this franchise have unfortunately grown all too familiar with over the years, watching genuine excitement and momentum get interrupted by unexpected setbacks at the worst possible times. Now, let's shift toward the genuinely difficult question this coaching staff now has to answer. Because with their starting left tackle likely sidelined for a significant chunk, if not the entirety of this season, the offensive line puzzle just became dramatically more complicated. The most logical, immediately obvious solution centers around the team's first-round pick from last year's draft, an offensive lineman who spent his entire life before arriving in Washington playing exclusively on the left side of the offensive line, only transitioning to right tackle during his rookie season with this organization. Given that extensive background, specifically playing left tackle at every level before turning professional, there is a strong argument to be made that sliding him back over to his natural, original position represents the cleanest, most sensible path forward for this coaching staff. Of course, that is far from the only option on the table. Some fans and analysts have floated the idea of shifting a different veteran offensive lineman who has previous NFL experience specifically at left tackle back into that spot, while another interior lineman could theoretically slide over to fill the resulting vacancy at left guard. There is also the possibility of simply moving a different current right tackle over to the left side entirely. Each of these scenarios would create a cascading chain reaction across the rest of the offensive line, essentially forcing this coaching staff to solve a complex, interconnected puzzle just to settle on their best possible starting five up front, all while simultaneously dealing with the fact that the team's presumed starting center has also been sidelined with a separate injury for several weeks. Now, the strongest argument in favor of using last year's first-round pick as the direct replacement centers on a simple, straightforward logic. This is a player who is specifically evaluated, scouted, and ultimately drafted in the first round based on his extensive collegiate track record playing left tackle. If this coaching staff and front office do not have enough confidence in his ability to handle that exact position, now that the opportunity has unexpectedly presented itself, it raises legitimate questions about how that evaluation process unfolded in the first place. Proponents of this approach argue that shifting him back to his natural, most experienced position, rather than piecing together some combination of players who have spent significantly less time at left tackle throughout their careers, represents both the most logical and most confidence-inspiring path forward for protecting the quarterback's blind side. At the same time, it is worth acknowledging the counter-argument as well, because this same lineman has now spent an entire rookie season specifically developing and building experience at right tackle, a different position with its own unique technical demands and nuances. Some worry that abruptly shifting him back to the other side of the line so early into his professional career could disrupt momentum he built during that first season. Even if left tackle was technically his more natural, extensively practiced position throughout his life before turning pro. Regardless of which specific combination this coaching staff ultimately settles on, one thing remains completely clear. This entire offensive line now has to be reconfigured on the fly. Just days before this team's preseason opener and mere weeks before the regular season kicks off in earnest. It is exactly the kind of adversity that tests organizational depth, coaching creativity, and player development all at the same time. There is, admittedly, one genuine silver lining worth mentioning here for anxious fans searching for any shred of optimism, because this same franchise actually made an improbable run all the way to the NFC Championship game just one season ago without this same veteran left tackle even being part of the roster at that time. That accomplishment serves as a real, tangible reminder that individual injuries, even significant ones at premium positions, do not automatically doom an entire season. This organization has already proven it possesses enough talent, coaching, and resilience elsewhere on the roster to overcome significant absences and still compete at an extremely high level. There is also a reasonable expectation that the coaching staff will adjust its offensive scheme specifically to help compensate for whatever inexperience or vulnerability exists at that replacement left tackle spot. That could mean incorporating additional tight ends and extra blockers to chip and assist on passing downs, deliberately building in more protection help rather than simply asking whoever lines up at left tackle to handle elite pass rushers entirely on an island, given how much this coaching staff clearly values protecting their franchise quarterback. It stands to reason they will do everything schematically possible to shore up that specific vulnerability rather than leaving it exposed. It is also worth noting that this team has continued adding pieces to its overall roster even amid this unfolding injury situation, including reportedly bringing in a handful of additional offensive linemen just within the same news cycle as this injury report, adding further depth and additional camp bodies to compete for potential roster spots as this line sorts itself out over the coming days and weeks. So where does all of this ultimately leave the Washington Commanders as they prepare to open their preseason schedule and push toward the regular season? A genuinely significant, difficult-to-replace piece of last season's surprising playoff run is now expected to miss a substantial portion, if not the entirety, of this upcoming season. The coaching staff faces a genuinely complex, interconnected puzzle piecing together its best possible starting offensive line combination on relatively short notice, and an entire fan base that had just started fully embracing the optimism surrounding a loaded, talented roster now has to absorb some real, painful uncertainty heading into the season. But football, as difficult as it may be to accept in this exact moment, always finds a way to continue moving forward. This organization has already proven capable of overcoming significant adversity before. And however this specific offensive line puzzle ultimately gets solved, the shared goal across this entire locker room remains exactly the same: protecting the franchise quarterback and giving this talented roster every possible chance to compete for a championship this season. So now it is your turn, and we genuinely want to hear what you think. Do you believe last year's first-round pick should be the immediate, obvious answer to fill this massive void at left tackle? Are you confident this coaching staff can scheme around this significant loss the same way they navigated adversity during last year's surprising playoff run? And how worried are you about the ripple effects this injury creates across the rest of this offensive line? Drop your solutions, your predictions, and your honest reactions down in the comments section below, because we absolutely want to hear how you would handle this genuinely difficult roster puzzle. If this update helped you fully understand the scope of this developing situation, do us a favor and smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach even more dedicated fans just like yourself. And if you have not already subscribed, now is the perfect time, because we are going to be right here bringing you every single update as this offensive line situation continues to develop throughout the rest of training camp and into the regular season. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the very next update.